My sister stole my fiancé, got pregnant with his baby, and showed up to our wedding rehearsal dinner wearing my 5-carat engagement ring. As she stood there, hand in hand with my ex, my mother leaned in and whispered loud enough for the whole family to hear, "Successful men want a wife, not a workhorse." They thought they were taking everything. My fiancé, my sister, my family's respect. What they didn't know was that the $800,000 house Marcus just finished paying for was already legally and exclusively in my name. Before I tell you how I stood by and watched the moving truck they hired drive away with my new furniture, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who should have loved you most. The crystal chandeliers of the Ember, Atlanta's most exclusive 5-star restaurant, cast a cold light on the empty chair beside me. It was 7 p.m. This was supposed to be our wedding rehearsal dinner. My fiancé Marcus King was now an hour late, and my sister Brianna was nowhere to be found. I shifted in my seat, the silk of my dress feeling too tight. I'm Demetra, 32 years old, and I'm a professional event planner. I coordinate chaos for a living. I manage million-dollar budgets and impossible timelines for Fortune 500 companies. Yet I couldn't seem to manage the most important event of my own life. My family was already seated around the long, opulent table. Aunts and uncles whispered among themselves, pointedly, not looking at me. The air was thick with the kind of acidic pity I had grown up with, the kind reserved for the difficult child. My father, Leroy, just stared into his iced tea, his silence a familiar heavy blanket. He never took sides, which in our family always meant he was on theirs. My mother, Diane, however, lived for these moments. She took a delicate sip of her Chardonnay, her eyes scanning the room before landing directly on me. "Well, Demetra," she said, her voice loud enough for the entire table to hear. "It seems your young man is having second thoughts. I can't say I blame him." My jaw tightened. "Mom, not now. He's probably just stuck in traffic." "Traffic?" She gave a short, sharp laugh that made my skin crawl. Or maybe he finally realized what he was getting into. She turned to my Aunt Simone. "I've told her for years, you can't build a marriage when you're busy building an empire. Men like Marcus need attention. They need a wife." The insult was clear. I was just the workhorse. The reliable, successful, darker-skinned daughter who paid for things while her sister Brianna was the prize. "Bree, now she knows how to treat a man," my mother continued, checking her phone. "That girl knows her value isn't just in a spreadsheet. A successful man wants a woman who tends to the home, someone soft, someone accommodating." Bree, my 29-year-old sister, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who had conveniently also stopped answering her phone 2 hours ago. A cold dread heavier than the humiliation began to settle in my stomach. "Mom, please," I whispered, desperate to stop the scene. "I'm just saying what everyone is thinking," Diane said, waving her hand dismissively. Maybe Marcus finally realized he wants the trophy, not the person who pays for the trophy. Maybe he realized. The heavy oak doors of the private dining room swung open. My mother stopped talking. Every head at the table turned. It wasn't just Marcus. It was Marcus and Brianna, hand in hand. My mother's words hung in the air, sharp and suffocating. This wasn't the first time. This was a pattern polished over 30 years of practice. Her casual cruelty instantly transported me back to my 18th birthday. It was my senior prom. I had saved for 6 months from my after-school job to buy an emerald green dress. I felt beautiful in it, truly beautiful, maybe for the first time. I found Bree in my room. She was 15, holding the dress against her own body, a look of pure envy on her face. "It's not fair," she'd pouted. "You always get the nice things." Later that night, I found the dress crumpled on my closet floor. A huge, jagged tear ran right down the seam, completely beyond repair. When I confronted her, Bree burst into tears, claiming she had just wanted to try it on and it just ripped. My mother Diane had sided with her immediately. "Look what you've done," she'd said to me. "You've made your sister hysterical. It was just an accident." "She tore my prom dress," I cried. "And you're going to stay home," my mother snapped, her voice void of sympathy. "Bree is too upset to be left alone. You're the older sister, Demetra. Stop being so selfish and think about someone else for a change." I stayed home. Bree watched movies in the living room perfectly fine. I blinked, forcing the memory away. Back in the restaurant, the cold dread intensified. My family watched me, waiting for me to crack, to cry, to make a scene just so they could call me dramatic. I lifted my chin, my voice coming out tighter than I wanted. "Marcus is just busy, Mom. He'll be here." Diane let out that little scoff, the one that meant she was about to deliver the killing blow. She leaned in conspiratorially to Aunt Simone. "Busy or just bored, I'm telling you, that sister of yours, Bree, even she knows how to keep a man interested better than you do. At least she knows her primary job isn't a spreadsheet." The words landed like a slap. Even Bree, my sister who had never held a job for more than 6 months, my sister who still let our parents pay her car note. I opened my mouth to say something, anything to defend myself, to scream at all of them. But just as I drew my breath, the heavy oak doors of the private dining room swung open, and there he was, and there she was, together. Marcus and Brianna walked in. They were holding hands. My breath hitched in my throat, trapped somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Marcus, my fiancé, was gripping the hand of my sister Bree. It wasn't a friendly gesture. His thumb was rubbing slow circles on the back of her hand. It was intimate. It was possessive. But it was Bree who held my gaze. She was wearing a tight white silk dress. A dress I had never seen before, and one I knew I could never afford. It clung to every curve, and it blatantly proudly displayed the unmistakable rounded swell of a pregnancy bump. It wasn't a small bump. It was the pronounced, firm curve of at least 4, maybe 5 months. And she was smiling. A slow, triumphant, venomous smile that was aimed only at me. The room, which had been buzzing with my family's whispers, fell into a complete echoing silence. The clinking of silverware stopped. My father, Leroy, froze with his iced tea halfway to his mouth. My gaze dropped from her smile to her left hand, the one Marcus was holding. And the world stopped. There on her ring finger was my ring. My ring. The 5-carat cushion-cut heirloom diamond that had belonged to Marcus's grandmother. The ring he had slipped onto my finger 6 months ago on the Jackson Street Bridge, telling me I was the only woman he could ever imagine honoring with his family's legacy. It was on her finger. I felt the blood drain from my face. I could feel my aunts and uncles staring, their eyes wide, darting between me, my sister, and the ring. As if sensing my focus, Bree's smile widened. She slowly lifted her hand, the one not holding Marcus's, and brushed an imaginary strand of hair from her face. The movement was calculated. It was a performance. She turned her hand this way and that, letting the restaurant's chandeliers catch every facet of the diamond, sending blinding flashes of light across the table. She was showing it off. To me, to my mother, to my father, to everyone. She was claiming her prize. Marcus still hadn't looked at me. Not once. He just stood there, his jaw set, his grip tight on my sister's hand, like a man bracing for an impact he knew he deserved. Bree, however, looked like she was enjoying every second of the silent, agonizing torture. Marcus finally cleared his throat, a small, nervous sound that seemed impossibly loud in the dead silence. He still wouldn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on a point on the far wall just above my father's head. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice strained, almost unrecognizable. "I know this was supposed to be... well, there's been a slight change of plans." I could feel my own heart hammering against my ribs, a slow, painful drumbeat. A change of plans. He made it sound like he was moving a dinner reservation, not shattering a life. He pulled Bree closer to his side, his arm wrapping around her waist, just above her swollen belly. She leaned into him, her expression a sickening mix of feigned modesty and pure triumph. "Bree and I," he continued, finally, tearing his gaze from the wall to look at my parents. He still refused to look at me. "Bree and I, we actually got married this morning." The words hit the air and hung there heavy and toxic. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, her mouth opening in a silent "oh." My father's face darkened, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger at Marcus or at me for somehow causing this scene. Married. He had married my sister. He had taken my ring, my family, my future, and given it to her. But Brianna wasn't finished. She wasn't going to let the announcement end there. She needed to twist the knife. She placed her free hand, my hand wearing my ring, protectively over her stomach. She looked directly at me, her eyes shining with malicious victory. "And," she added, her voice syrupy sweet, "we are so thrilled to announce that we're expecting a baby boy." A boy. A son for Marcus. The son I could never give him, the one we had cried about during long private nights after another failed round of fertility treatments. She knew how much that would hurt. The sound of shattering glass ripped through the silence. I looked down. My hand was still clenched in the air, but the crystal water goblet I had been holding was now in 1,000 pieces on the pristine white tablecloth. Water and ice spread slowly like a pool of blood. I hadn't even felt it slip. The shattering glass broke the spell. For 1 second, a single agonizing second, I thought my mother would finally see me. I thought she would look at the broken crystal, at the blood welling in my palm from a small shard, at the absolute devastation in her daughter's eyes, and choose me. I was a fool. Diane's face, which had been a mask of frozen shock, suddenly melted. It cracked into a wide, brilliant, ecstatic smile. She let out a high-pitched shriek of pure joy. "Oh my goodness!" she screamed, rushing past me, her designer heels crunching on the glass shards. She didn't even look down. She threw her arms around Brianna, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Bree, my baby, you're pregnant, a boy." She turned to Marcus, grabbing his arm, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Marcus, I always knew you were the right choice. Oh, I am just so thrilled. A grandson. Leroy, did you hear? We're having a grandson." It was like a dam of hypocrisy had broken. My mother's celebration gave everyone else permission. My father, Leroy, who had been a stone statue, suddenly stood up. A slow smile spread across his face as he clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Well, son," he said, his voice booming, "you certainly know how to make an entrance." Aunt Simone rushed over. "Bree, honey, just look at you, that ring, and a baby Diane, you must be over the moon." The room, which moments before had been a tomb, exploded. Laughter, congratulations, excited chatter. They swarmed Bree and Marcus, hugging them, touching her stomach, admiring the ring. My ring. And I just stood there, invisible. My hand was bleeding. The crimson drop hit the white tablecloth, but no one saw it. They were all too busy celebrating the couple who had just detonated my life. They stepped around me, around the broken glass, as if I was just another waiter. My voice came out as a broken whisper. "The house." The laughter died down. Marcus finally turned to look at me. His eyes weren't guilty. They weren't apologetic. They were cold, annoyed. "What about the house, Marcus?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The closing. We have the closing tomorrow. The down payment. My $50,000. He looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated dismissal. He didn't even consult Bree. He knew his answer. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice loud and clear for the room to hear, "Bree and I will be handling the closing tomorrow. It's a family home now." He reached into his jacket pocket. "This whole dinner was unfortunate," he said, as if I had spilled some wine. He pulled out $100 bill and tossed it onto the table right next to the puddle of water and blood. "That should cover your drink." He turned his back on me, putting his arm around my pregnant sister, and smiled at my beaming mother. "Now, Diane, you were telling me about the nursery." I ran. I don't remember leaving the table. I don't remember weaving through the other diners, their faces blurred masks of curiosity. I just remember the cold night air hitting my face as I burst through the restaurant's heavy doors, the valet shouting something after me that I couldn't understand. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely get the key into my car door. I collapsed into the driver's seat, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The silence of the car was deafening after the explosion of noise inside. I stared at my own reflection in the dark windshield. A woman I didn't even recognize, her eyes wide with a pain so deep it hadn't even processed into tears yet. My hand was still bleeding. A dark crimson drop fell onto the beige leather of my car seat. Then my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I flinched. A desperate childish part of me hoped it was Marcus. An apology. A terrible mistake. I was wrong. It was my mother. A text message from Diane. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Dimitra, you have embarrassed this entire family. How dare you make a scene like that and run out? You've made everyone uncomfortable. Why can't you just be happy for your sister for once in your life?" It's exactly this kind of selfish, dramatic behavior that drove Marcus away in the first place. I read the message twice. My selfish behavior, my drama. I drove him away. She wasn't just siding with them, she was blaming me. She saw her daughter's life implode, saw her fiancé stolen by her other daughter, and her first instinct was to blame me for not handling my own public execution with more grace. I felt the sob building, a raw animal sound of pure agony. But before I could even make a sound, my phone buzzed again. A new message. This time from Bree. It was a picture, a selfie. It was her and Marcus in what looked like a hotel room taken hours before. They were kissing. Marcus was smiling at the camera, and Bree was holding up her left hand, my ring sparkling under the light, her eyes squeezed shut in a parody of bliss. Beneath the photo, she had written just 5 words. 5 words that sealed my fate and confirmed my worthlessness in their world. "Thanks for handing him over." I drove. I don't know where I was going. The city lights of Atlanta smeared past my window in a blur of neon and tears I refused to let fall. My mother's words echoed in my head. My selfish behavior. My drama. Bree's text message, that picture burned behind my eyelids. "Thanks for handing him over." The rage and humiliation were so thick in my throat I could barely breathe. I had to pull over, parking on a dark tree-lined street, my hands shaking so hard on the steering wheel that my shoulders ached. I had given them everything. I had been the good daughter, the responsible one, the high-achieving event planner who made them look good. I had swallowed their insults, their constant casual preference for Bree for years. And for what? To be publicly executed by my entire family. My mind flashed back to the one person who had ever truly seen me. The one person who had never, not once, made me feel small. My grandmother Alara. I remembered her funeral 2 years ago. The suffocating scent of lilies and the sound of my mother's loud performative sobs. After the service, while Diane held court, accepting condolences like an actress accepting an award, my grandmother's sister, my great-aunt Imani, had quietly guided me to the back room. Grandma Ilara was there, frail in her bed, but her eyes were still sharp as glass. She had waved her nurse away and gripped my hand. Her skin was paper-thin, but her grip was like steel. "Don't you let them break you, Dimitra," she had whispered, her voice a dry rattle. "Your mother, she's weak. She chases shiny things." She coughed a painful sound, but her eyes never left mine. "I'm leaving you $50,000. It's in a private trust. You are never to tell your mother about it. She doesn't respect money. She only respects what it buys. You know the value of hard work. You know what's real." She squeezed my hand tighter. "And you listen to your Aunt Imani. She's the only one in this family who got my brain. She will protect you. Promise me you'll listen to her." I had promised. Now sitting in my dark car, the realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. That $50,000, the secret inheritance. It was the exact amount I had used for the down payment on the house. The house Marcus and Bree were planning to move into tomorrow. They weren't just stealing my fiancé and my sister. They were stealing my grandmother's legacy, my one true safety net. A new feeling cut through the paralyzing grief. It was cold, it was sharp, and it was focused. I picked up my phone, my hands suddenly steady. I ignored the texts from my family. I scrolled past Marcus's name. I found the one contact that mattered. Aunt Imani. I pulled off the highway, the car skidding onto the gravel shoulder of a dark access road. I hit the button for my contacts, my thumb shaking as I scrolled past. Mom, past Bree, past Marcus, do not call, until I landed on the one name that represented safety. Aunt Imani. She answered on the second ring, her voice as crisp and sharp as a legal document even at nearly 10 p.m. Dimitra, this is unexpected. The sound of her calm, controlled voice broke the dam. The sobs I had been holding back finally exploded out of me. Aunt Imani. I choked out the words tearing from my throat. It happened. It all happened. Breathe, Dimitra, she commanded. There was no sympathy in her voice, only focus. Breathe and use your words. What happened? Bree and Marcus. I gasped, trying to pull in air. They're together. She's pregnant. They're married. They showed up at the rehearsal dinner. He gave her my ring. He gave her my grandmother's ring. I see, Imani said. The silence on her end was heavy, calculating. And your mother? She celebrated. I whispered, the shame of it burning fresh. She hugged them. She blamed me. And now they're taking the house. They're moving in tomorrow. They're stealing my down payment, Aunt Imani. They're taking Grandma Ilara's $50,000. Dimitra, her voice cut through my panic like a surgeon's scalpel. Stop crying. Crying is a luxury we don't have time for. I need you to answer me with a simple yes or no. 2 months ago, when Marcus suggested buying that house through an LLC for tax purposes, did you do exactly what I told you to do? I scrubbed at my tears, my mind racing back. The trip to her law office, the stack of papers, the detailed, almost paranoid instructions. Yes, I said, my voice shaky. I think so. I filed the LLC papers myself as the organizer. I put the down payment in from my private trust, just like you said, and I had him sign the operating agreement you drafted, the one you put in the middle of all the other loan application forms. And did he read it? No, I said, remembering his casual arrogance signing the stack of papers while taking a business call. He just signed where I put the sticky flags. A long pause filled the line. Then I heard it. A low, cold chuckle. It was the most terrifying and beautiful sound I had ever heard. Good, Aunt Imani said, her voice smooth as velvet. Then they haven't taken anything, Dimitra. They haven't stolen your ring, your fiancé, or your money. They just walked right into the trap we set for them. Now listen very carefully. My mind flashed back 2 months, the memory crystal clear. I was sitting in Aunt Imani's office on the 40th floor, overlooking the Atlanta skyline. I was nervous, twisting my hands in my lap. He wants to buy the house through an LLC, I'd explained, feeling foolish. Marcus says it's for tax purposes, that it's smarter. Aunt Imani leaned back in her high-backed leather chair. She didn't smile. She observed, a tax purpose, of course he does. An investment banker, white arrogant, thinks he's the smartest man in every room, and he wants to put your $50,000 of inheritance into his company. He said it's our company, I corrected weakly. Dimitra, she said, her voice sharp, cutting through my naivety. There is no hour when a man like that is involved. There is only his and what he can take, so we will use his own arrogance against him. She slid a thick, freshly printed document across her mahogany desk. He wants an LLC, fine. We'll give him an LLC. But in the state of Georgia, the person who files the articles of organization, the organizer, is the one who sets the initial rules. That person, my dear niece, will be you. I looked at the document. But he'll see my name. He'll know. He'll see what he wants to see, Imani said. He'll see a tax shelter. He won't see the fine print. And this, she tapped another much thicker document, is the fine print. This is the operating agreement. I drafted it myself. It is a work of art. What does it do? It does everything, she said, a small cold smile playing on her lips. It outlines the structure of the company. It states that the organizer, you will appoint the managing member. And guess who the sole unremovable managing member is? You. I stared at her confused. But Marcus is paying for the house. He's taking out the loan. Exactly, Imani said, which makes him the capital member. His role is to contribute capital. That's it. I wrote it very clearly in Section 4B. The capital member has 0 voting rights, 0 managerial control. He is a silent investor in a company that you and you alone will own and control. You think he'll sign this? Aunt Imani finally smiled. He's a man who thinks an event planner is cute. He thinks you're too simple to understand his complex world of finance. He won't read past the first page. He'll sign, Dimitra. He'll sign. I was still hesitant, my own respect for Marcus's intelligence fighting against my aunt's cold logic. But Aunt Imani, he will read it, won't he? He's an investment banker. He reads contracts for a living. He's not stupid. Aunt Imani fixed me with a stare that could freeze fire. No, Dimitra, he's not stupid. He's arrogant. And arrogance is a much more exploitable weakness. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. Let's be very clear about the man you are marrying. He is a white man from old money who works in finance. He is about to marry a black woman who he thinks is just a cute event planner. He believes in his bones that he is fundamentally, intellectually, and strategically superior to you in every single way. I flinched, but I knew she was right. He will not read a 100-page operating agreement, she continued, her voice filled with absolute certainty, because his ego will not allow him to believe that you could ever pull one over on him. He will see the thickness of the file, assume its standard, and be too busy and self-important to do his due diligence. She tapped the document. He will just flip to the signature page that I have so helpfully flagged for him. He will sign it, Dimitra. He'll sign it because he cannot possibly imagine a world where you are smarter than he is. Her words echoed in my car, hitting me with the force of truth. That was Marcus. That was exactly who he was. I took a shaky breath, the cold focus returning. Aunt Imani, I said, my voice now steady, they're going to the closing tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., to sign the final papers and get the keys. The line was silent for a moment. I heard the faint sound of ice clinking in a glass. Good, Aunt Imani finally said. Let them. Let him sign every last page. Let Marcus wire that $750,000. Let him pay off your new house. That is exactly what we want. Now get some sleep. You have a big day tomorrow. I finally made it back to my apartment just before midnight. The drive had been a blur of rage and cold, calculated planning. The silence of my own home felt suffocating. This was the space I had shared with Marcus. His running shoes were still by the door. His favorite coffee mug was in the sink. The life I thought I had was still here, a ghost haunting every room. I sank onto the sofa, my body numb, my mind racing. I needed to sleep, but I knew I couldn't. I opened my laptop, intending to review my work schedule to find some small piece of normalcy. Instead, an email sat at the top of my inbox. The sender was Law Offices of Harrison Thorne, Marcus's lawyers. My blood ran cold. I clicked it open. Dear Ms. Williams, this letter serves as formal notice regarding the property at 123 Maple Drive. As you are aware, the closing is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. We understand you will not be proceeding with the marriage to our client, Mr. Marcus King. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, my heart pounding. Furthermore, regarding the $50,000 earnest money deposit which you provided from a personal account, our client has been advised to view this contribution as a non-refundable gift. This gift is in consideration of the union between Mr. King and your sister, Ms. Brianna Williams. Please be advised that any attempt to reclaim these funds will be met with immediate and robust legal action from our firm. I read it again and again. A gift. A non-refundable gift. They weren't just taking my fiancé. They weren't just taking my sister. They weren't just taking the house I had picked out. They were stealing my grandmother's money. The $50,000 that Grandma Alara had left me. My one piece of security. My one act of true family love. They were taking it and calling it a gift for their wedding. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed Aunt Imani. I didn't even say hello. Aunt Imani, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. They're coming for Grandma's money. Marcus's lawyer just sent an email. They're calling the $50,000 a gift to him and Bree. The line was quiet for a second, then I heard that same terrifyingly calm chuckle. Of course they are, Imani said. They are predictable if nothing else. Let them think that, Dimitra. Let them believe they have you cornered. But what do? I asked. The closing is in the morning. I know, she said. 10 a.m. I want you to go to the finest salon you know as soon as it opens. Get your hair and makeup done. Put on your most expensive, most powerful suit, the one you wear when you close $1 million deal. What, Aunt Imani? This is not the time to… You will walk into that closing office tomorrow, she interrupted, her voice like steel. You will look like the 1% owner you are. You will sit next to me. You will not look at them. You will not speak to them. You will not cry. You will say nothing. Do you understand me, Dimitra? Absolutely nothing. Let them sign. The elevator doors of the downtown law firm dinged open, and my family spilled out into the lobby. They were not just a family, they were a victory parade. Marcus led the way, his chest puffed out in a new crisp Tom Ford suit. He was the conquering hero. Beside him was Brianna, my sister, practically glowing. She wore a bright yellow maternity dress, her hand resting permanently on her stomach, her other hand linked tightly with Marcus's. She was laughing, a loud, obnoxious sound that echoed in the marble foyer. My mother Diane and my father Leroy followed right behind them, beaming like proud parents at a graduation. They were dressed to the nines, ready to celebrate the acquisition of their daughter's new luxurious life. They rounded the corner toward the main closing office, their laughter cutting off abruptly. We were already there. I was sitting on a firm leather sofa, and next to me sat Aunt Imani. I had done exactly as she instructed. My hair was pulled back into a sleek, severe bun. I wore my most powerful suit, a sharp navy blue outfit I had saved for my most important clients. My makeup was flawless. I looked and felt like a weapon. Aunt Imani beside me was the very picture of legal power, dressed in dark gray, her briefcase resting on her lap, observing them over the top of her glasses, with the mild interest of a scientist studying insects. Bree recovered first. That venomous smile I knew so well spread across her face. She sauntered over her pregnant belly, leading the way, Marcus in tow. "Oh, Dimitra," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You actually came. How brave of you." She looked me up and down, taking in my suit. "Are you here to watch what you'll never have, trying to get one last look before we change the locks?" My mother, Diane, hurried over, placing a placating hand on Bree's arm. "Now, Brianna, be nice," she said, though her eyes were just as cruel. She patted Bree's hand. "We have to remember this was her house for a minute anyway. It's natural she's having a hard time letting go." She looked at me. "It's okay to be sad, honey. We understand." I didn't say a word. I just stared at them, my face perfectly neutral, exactly as Imani had coached me. My silence, my refusal to cry or scream, seemed to unnerve them more than any outburst could have. Marcus, impatient with the emotion, stepped forward. He completely ignored me as if I were a piece of furniture, and addressed the closing attorney, Mr. Henderson, who had just stepped out of his office. "Mr. Henderson, are we ready?" Marcus boomed, pulling out his expensive watch. "My wife and I have an appointment at Restoration Hardware in an hour. We'd like to get this paperwork finished so we can start buying furniture for our new home." We were ushered into a large, sterile conference room. The closing attorney, Mr. Henderson, sat at the head of the table, flanked by stacks of documents that must have been 3 inches thick. Marcus, ever the executive, confidently took the seat directly across from him. Bree sat beside Marcus, positively beaming, while my parents, Diane and Leroy, settled into chairs against the wall, acting as the proud audience. Aunt Amani and I sat at the far end of the table. I kept my back straight, my hands clasped in my lap. I said nothing. "All right, folks," Mr. Henderson began. "This is a fairly straightforward closing. We have the transfer of title to the LLC Maple Drive Holdings and the funding documents from Mr. King." He pushed the first stack of papers toward Marcus. "These are the final title and deed transfer documents granting ownership to Maple Drive Holdings LLC." I watched Marcus's eyes scan the top page. He didn't flip to the second page. He didn't look at the LLC's articles of organization or the operating agreement that were included in the packet. As an investment banker, he'd seen 1,000 of these. To him, this was just paperwork. He was too arrogant to believe he needed to read the fine print on a deal orchestrated in his mind by his simple-minded ex-fiancée. "Standard," he muttered. He grabbed the pen, a gold Mont Blanc, and executed a flawless, arrogant signature on the last page. "Excellent," Mr. Henderson said, unaware of the drama unfolding. "Now this next packet contains the loan documents and the wire transfer authorization for the remaining balance of $750,000 to be paid by you, Mr. King, to the seller, effectively satisfying all liens on the property." Marcus didn't even skim it. He just flipped to the last page, signed his name, and pushed the packet back. "My bank is on standby," he said. "The wire will be initiated the moment you give the word." Throughout this entire exchange, Aunt Amani sat perfectly still. She didn't look at the papers. She didn't look at the lawyer. She just watched Marcus. Her expression was neutral, but I could see a small, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She was enjoying this. She was watching a man who believed he was conquering a kingdom, meticulously signing his own execution papers. Bree was too busy texting, probably sending pictures of the "we bought a house" keys to her friends, to notice a thing. She just sighed happily and leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder. Mr. Henderson, the closing attorney, looked up from the final document. "All right, that brings us to the final payment. The outstanding balance to the seller is $750,000. Marcus didn't even blink. This was pocket change to him, the final step in his conquest. He leaned back in his chair and pulled out his phone with a flourish, as if he were a magician performing a grand trick. "Give me 1 second, he said, tapping on the screen. He was the picture of effortless wealth and control. My mother Diane watched him with an almost worshipful gaze. This was the son-in-law she had always dreamed of, decisive, rich, and completely in charge. Marcus's thumb tapped the screen a few more times. He held the phone up for a moment as if confirming the numbers, and then his face relaxed into a smug smile. "Done," he announced, placing the phone face down on the polished table. "The $750,000 has been wired. You should have confirmation in a moment." Mr. Henderson turned to his computer monitor and typed for a few seconds. His eyes scanned the screen, and then he nodded. "Yes, indeed. The wire transfer is confirmed. The funds have been received in full." He stood up, gathering a small set of keys from his desk. "Well, that concludes our business. Congratulations, Mr. King, Ms. Williams." He pushed the keys across the table toward Marcus. "The property at 123 Maple Drive now officially belongs to Maple Drive Holdings, LLC." The moment the keys touched Marcus's hand, Bree let out a piercing shriek of joy. "Oh my God, we did it, baby, it's ours!" She threw her arms around Marcus's neck, kissing him loudly. My mother and father erupted in applause. Congratulations! Diane cried, rushing over to hug Bree. My brilliant girl, you got your house, and you, Marcus, you are just a miracle worker. My father Leroy clapped Marcus on the back. Well done, son. Well done. A beautiful home for my new grandson. They were a perfect, happy family celebrating their victory. They were so caught up in their joy that they didn't even notice as Aunt Imani and I quietly stood up and slipped out of the conference room. They had their keys. They had their victory. Now it was time for them to go see what they had really just bought. The ride to the house was a victory lap. Marcus drove his brand new gleaming black Escalade, the one he had proudly charged to the joint credit card account just last week, calling it an early wedding present. Bree sat in the passenger seat, already on the phone, her voice high and giddy. You won't believe it, girl, she chirped. It's huge. 5 bedrooms, a pool. Yes, a pool. We're thinking the housewarming party will be legendary. You have to come. My mother and father sat in the back, Diane visibly preening, already planning how she would describe this new wealthy life to her friends. Leroy was quiet as usual, but even he seemed pleased, looking out the window at the upscale manicured lawns of the Maple Drive neighborhood. They were a portrait of success, the perfect triumphant family. Marcus turned the Escalade into the sweeping circular driveway of 123 Maple Drive. The house was a beautiful, modern craftsman, exactly what I had spent months searching for. Oh, it's perfect, Bree breathed, unbuckling her seatbelt before the car even stopped. It's just perfect, Marcus. Look at our home. She practically leaped from the car and ran up the stone walkway to the heavy oak front door. She turned back, her face a mask of pure ecstasy, and blew a kiss at Marcus. Our new life, baby, she declared. She turned back to the door, fumbling in her purse for the keys Mr. Henderson had given them. She pulled them out, the shiny metal glinting in the sunlight. Here we go. She jammed the key into the deadbolt, and nothing happened. She tried again, pushing harder. The key refused to turn. Her smile faltered, replaced by a confused pout. What's wrong with this thing? She muttered. She pulled the key out, blew on it, and jammed it back in. She jiggled it violently. The lock didn't budge. On you, she called out, her voice losing its cheerful lilt and gaining an edge of frustration. The key isn't working. I think this stupid lock is broken. Marcus sighed, a put-upon sound of a man burdened by minor inconveniences. You're probably not doing it right, honey. He walked leisurely up the path, his Tom Ford suit jacket unbuttoned. Here, let me. He took the keys from her hand, his confidence absolute. He slid the key into the lock. He tried to turn it. It didn't move. He frowned, applying more pressure. He grunted slightly, his shoulder pushing against the door. The key remained stubbornly immobile. What the hell? He said, pulling the key out and staring at it, as if the small piece of metal had personally insulted him. He looked at the lock. It was a new high-security deadbolt. It wasn't the lock he remembered seeing last week. The lock had been changed. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, his face darkening with annoyance. This is ridiculous. I'm calling Henderson. He gave us the wrong keys. He was just about to dial, his thumb hovering over the screen, when the heavy oak door swung open with a smooth, silent click. It wasn't a real estate agent. It wasn't Mr. Henderson. Standing in the doorway, framed like a queen in her throne room, was my Aunt Imani. She was not dressed for a move. She wore a sharp, impeccably tailored gray suit, her arms folded. In one hand she held a thick, leather-bound folder. She looked at them with a polite, almost bored expression. Good afternoon, she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. May I help you? Marcus lowered his phone, his confusion visible. Aunt Imani? What are you doing here? How did you get in? I used my key, she replied simply. Bree, who had stepped back, pushed forward. What are you doing here? This is our house. Get out. Aunt Imani raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Your house? That's interesting, because my records show something quite different. Marcus stepped forward, his banker's arrogance returning. I don't know what game you're playing, but we just closed on this property not 30 minutes ago. This is my house. Now I'm asking you politely to leave before I call the police." Aunt Imani's polite expression didn't waver. She opened the folder in her hand. "Are you referring to the property at 123 Maple Drive, which was just purchased by Maple Drive Holdings LLC?" "You know damn well I am," Marcus snapped. "Excellent," Imani said, tapping the top page. "Then I'm afraid you are the one who needs to leave. You see, this property is owned by Maple Drive Holdings, and according to the LLC's official operating agreement which you signed," she held up a document bearing his signature, "the sole managing member with 100% of the voting rights is my client, Ms. Demetra Williams." She paused, letting the words land. "In layman's terms, Mr. King, she owns this company, and she owns this house." Bree's face crumpled. "What? No, that's a lie." "It's all right here in the contract you didn't read," Imani said. Just as Marcus started to sputter, a modest sedan pulled up to the curb behind the Escalade. The driver's side door opened and I stepped out wearing my navy blue power suit and quietly walked up the driveway. I walked up the stone path, stopping a few feet behind Aunt Imani. I crossed my arms and just waited. Marcus's face had gone a chalky pale white. He was looking at me, then at Imani, then back at the house, the pieces visibly painfully clicking into place. "No," he stammered, shaking his head. "No, the closing, the paperwork, the deposit, the loan. I paid for this house." He yelled the last part as if saying it louder would make it true. "I just wired $750,000. "Yes, you did," Aunt Imani said, her voice laced with a terrifying polite calm. "And on behalf of my client, Ms. Demetra Williams, I want to extend our sincerest gratitude. It was incredibly generous of you to pay off her mortgage in full. She is deeply, deeply appreciative." Marcus looked like he was going to be sick right there on the pristine walkway. "You can't do this," Bree finally shrieked, her voice cracking. "The $50,000, the deposit, that was our money, that was joint money." Aunt Imani actually laughed, a short, sharp barking sound. "Joint money? Oh, my dear, no. That's the second part of the contract you didn't read." She held up another page from her folder. "That $50,000 was Ms. Williams's personal inheritance from her grandmother Ilara, untouchable, non-marital property, and Mr. King—" She turned her head to Marcus, who looked like he was about to collapse. "You were so clever. You wanted to protect your assets by forming an LLC, remember?" "You signed this document," she said, tapping the paper. "An addendum to the operating agreement. It explicitly acknowledges that Ms. Williams's $50,000 was her sole capital investment into the LLC. In exchange for that investment, she was granted 100% of the managerial control." She smiled, a true, bright, devastating smile. "You didn't just pay for a house you don't own, Mr. King. You legally signed a document agreeing that her money was the only money that mattered in the formation of the company. You just paid $750,000 for absolutely nothing. You have zero equity, zero control. You are not now, nor will you ever be, an owner of this property." The revelation hung in the air, thick and toxic. For a moment, no one moved. Marcus stared at Aunt Imani, his mouth slightly open, his mind clearly unable to process the magnitude of his miscalculation. It was Bree who broke the silence. The color drained from her face, her triumphant smirk collapsing into a mask of pure childish horror. "No," she whispered. It was a small, lost sound. "No, he's lying. Tell them they're lying, Marcus." But Marcus was silent, his world imploding. "No!" Bree shrieked, the sound tearing through the quiet, wealthy neighborhood. She lunged for the door, pounding on it with both fists. "It's my house! He promised me! It's my house!" Her legs seemed to give way, and she crumpled onto the expensive stone steps, her new designer dress pooling around her. The sobs that followed were not of grief, but of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the sound of a child who had just had her favorite toy ripped from her hands. "I hate you!" she screamed, pounding the steps. I hate you both! My mother, Diane, who had been frozen in disbelief, snapped into action. But she didn't rush to comfort her sobbing pregnant daughter. She spun around, her eyes landing on me as I stood calmly by my car. Her face was a mask of fury. You! She yelled, marching down the walkway, her finger pointed directly at my heart. Demetra, you did this! She got right in my face, so close I could smell the expensive perfume she was wearing. You twisted, selfish, wicked girl! How could you do this to your own sister? I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, my expression as calm and unbothered as Aunt Imani's. Look at her! Diane shrieked, pointing back at Bree, who was now rocking back and forth, wailing. She is pregnant. She is carrying your nephew. This is her home. You are putting that poor innocent baby at risk. You are going to fix this right now. You are going to sign whatever paper you need to sign and give your sister this house. She actually grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, trying to physically drag me toward the door as if I were a misbehaving child. I pulled my arm from her grasp, not violently, but with a firm, final gesture that made her stumble back. Her house? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I looked past my mother's furious face to my sobbing sister. Her house, like Marcus was her fiancé, like that 5-carat diamond was her ring. My gaze shifted back to Diane, and for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely no fear, only a cold, hard clarity. You seem to be confused, Mother, I said, my voice carrying in the quiet air. Last night you sat at that restaurant and you celebrated my humiliation. You rushed to hug my sister, the one who was pregnant with my fiancé's child. You blamed me for my selfish drama. I took a small step forward, forcing her to take a step back. You watched as Marcus threw a $100 bill at my feet to pay for my trouble, and you said nothing. In fact, you were beaming. You had finally traded your disappointing workhorse daughter for the trophy son-in-law you always wanted. I... My mother stammered, her anger faltering as she realized her neighbors were starting to peek through their blinds. You made your choice, I stated. You chose them. You erased me. You told me in no uncertain terms that I was not welcome, that this was their victory. I gestured to the sprawling mansion behind me. And this is my house. You are on my property. You are trespassing. Now it's your turn. Get out. Marcus's face was a terrible mixture of chalky white and blotchy red. He was shaking, his finger pointed at Aunt Imani. You can't, he stammered, the smooth, confident banker's voice completely gone, replaced by the panicked squeak of a cornered rat. This is illegal. I'll sue you. I'll sue her. I'll have your law license. I'm calling my lawyers right now. Please do, Aunt Imani said, adjusting the sleeve of her suit jacket. I would be delighted to send them a copy of the fully executed operating agreement, the one you signed. Or perhaps you'd prefer we start with the email your other lawyer sent my client last night, attempting to extort her out of her $50,000 inheritance by calling it a gift. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was checkmated, and he knew it. Before he could find a new threat, a new sound cut through the tense afternoon. It was the heavy rhythmic rumble of a diesel engine, accompanied by the periodic high-pitched beep, beep, beep of a truck in reverse. We all turned. A massive, bright yellow tow truck was backing slowly into the elegant circular driveway. Its hazard lights flashed, casting ugly, rhythmic pulses of light across my mother's horrified face and Bree's tear-streaked cheeks. The truck stopped just inches from the gleaming black bumper of the brand-new Escalade. A man in greasy blue overalls hopped down from the cab, a clipboard in his hand. He walked past our frozen family drama without a flicker of interest and went straight to the back of the Escalade. Afternoon, he grunted, not looking at anyone in particular. I'm here for the King vehicle. Repossession. Repossession. Marcus's voice cracked. That's impossible. That's absurd. I just bought this car last week. It's brand new. I paid for it. The driver sighed, clearly annoyed. Look, buddy, I just have the work order. It says the payment failed. If you have a problem, you take it up with the bank. I'm just here for the car. He's lying, Bree shrieked, finding her voice. He's with them. This is a trick. Oh dear, Aunt Imani said, her voice practically dripping with mock surprise. She put a hand to her cheek. I do believe I forgot to mention the credit card. Marcus spun around, his eyes wide with a new dawning horror. What credit card? The American Express Platinum card, Mr. King, Imani said, as if explaining something to a child. The joint account. The one you've held with my client for 3 years. The one you've been using for quite a lot of things lately. I finally spoke. My voice was cold and clear, and it cut through the air. I called the bank this morning, Marcus. I reported the account stolen, or rather, I corrected myself. I reported that my cosigner had committed fraud, run off with my sister, and was attempting to liquidate all our joint assets. I told them about this $90,000 Escalade you charged to it just last week. They were very interested. You froze the account, he stammered. I did, I said. As a co-owner, it was my right, and my duty. The tow truck driver, who had been efficiently hooking a chain to the Escalade's undercarriage, gave a final loud clank. The winch whirred to life, and the front wheels of the $90,000 SUV lifted off the pristine pavement with a sickening metallic groan. Which means, Mr. King, Aunt Imani continued, that the payment to the dealership, it didn't go through. It was flagged as fraudulent and reversed this morning. And when a luxury car dealership doesn't get paid for a car, they come and get it, I finished. The Escalade, their symbol of arrival, their victory chariot, was now dangling pathetically from a hook. Diane let out a small, strangled whimper. Bree just stared, her mouth hanging open. You can't, Marcus roared, taking a step toward the truck. The driver didn't even look at him. Sir, I step on this property, you interfere with a legal repo, I call the cops. Your beef is with the bank, not me. He finished securing the vehicle, climbed back into his cab, and with a final indifferent wave, he drove away, taking their new life with him. Watching the tow truck turn the corner, taking the Escalade with it, seemed to sever the last thread of Marcus's sanity. His face, which had been pale with shock, contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He was no longer the smooth, confident banker. He was a cornered animal. His eyes darted wildly, looking for someone to blame, and they landed on the calmest person there. Aunt Imani. You... He seethed, his voice a low growl. He took a step toward her. You did this. You old bitch! He lunged. He didn't just step. He lunged, his hands raised as if to push her. You conniving, miserable old... Aunt Imani didn't even flinch. She stood her ground on the top step, looking down at him with an expression of pure, icy disdain. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move a muscle. Touch me, Mr. King, she said, her voice cutting through his rage like a diamond. And I will add assault of a senior citizen to the fraud and grand theft auto charges you're already facing. I am a 60-year-old black woman, and you are a white man in a Tom Ford suit lunging at me in front of witnesses. How do you think that footage will play for a jury? Go ahead, make my day. Marcus froze, his hands still awkwardly raised, his face flushed with impotent fury. He knew he was trapped. He was a man who lived by public perception, and he had just lost control in the worst way possible. That's when I finally stepped forward from the driveway. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't cried. I just watched. And now I spoke. Actually, Marcus Imani isn't the one you should be worried about. He spun around to face me, his eyes wild. You think you've won? You think this is over? I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone what a psycho you are. You'll what? I asked, my voice genuinely curious. You have no money, you have no car, and as of about an hour ago, you have no job. The color drained from his face again. What? What are you talking about? My job, you can't touch my job. "Oh, I didn't have to," I said. "You did. You see, I was so impressed by your decision to marry my sister that I felt compelled to send a little wedding present of my own, not to you, but to your company's ethics board. I sent it this morning right after I froze the credit card." I saw his breathing hitch. He knew where this was going. "I sent them everything," I said, ticking items off on my fingers. "The photos from Bree, the emails from your lawyer trying to steal my inheritance, the bank statements showing you draining our joint account. And my personal favorite, I sent them the detailed investment portfolio you set up for my mother, Diane. The one where you advised her to move her entire retirement fund into your own high-risk private equity venture that's been bleeding money for 6 months." "You?" he whispered, horrified. "I just posed the question," I continued. "I asked if it was standard practice for their top investment bankers to secretly marry the sister of a client, while advising that client's mother to invest in a fund that financially benefits the banker directly. I suggested it looked a whole lot like elder financial abuse and massive fraud. They seemed very interested in looking into it." He stared at me, his world visibly shattering. He hadn't just lost $800,000. He hadn't just lost a house and a car. He had lost the one thing that defined him, his career. He was finished. Marcus just stood there vibrating. His face was a terrible mask of sweat and rage. He had just lost his career, his car, and $800,000 all in the span of 10 minutes. He looked at me, his eyes promising murder, but I didn't flinch. He looked at Aunt Amani, but she looked like she was ready to take him on in court and win before lunch. He was a bull and we were the matadors. He couldn't touch us, so he turned on the one person he could. Brianna. She was still crumpled on the bottom step, her fake sobs having turned into real panicked gasps. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Marcus," she whispered. "Baby, we can fix this. We can call—" "Fix this!" he roared, his voice cracking. He lunged toward her, jabbing his finger in her face. "You! This is all your fault!" Bree scrambled backward, trying to get to her feet. "What? No, I didn't! You told me she was stupid!" he screamed, pointing at me. "You told me your sister was a simple-minded, pathetic failure. You told me she wouldn't even know how to spell LLC, let alone own one." My mother, Diane, tried to intervene. "Marcus, please calm down. She's pregnant." "You shut up," he snapped at my mother. "You're just as bad, the both of you. You told me she was weak, that she'd cry, and we'd give her a few $1,000s and she'd go away. You set me up." "I didn't." Bree was standing now, backing away onto the lawn, her hands held up. "I thought she was stupid. I didn't know about Amani. I didn't know about any of this." "You trapped me," he yelled, his face inches from hers. "You trapped me with this thing," he spat, gesturing toward her pregnant stomach. "You and your broke, manipulative family. You think I'm going down for this. You think I'm losing everything while you keep the ring. Marcus, please, you're scaring me." "I'll show you scaring," he roared. And then he shoved her. It wasn't a small push. It was a violent, two-handed, open-palmed shove directly to her chest. "You and this baby," he screamed. "Get out of my life!" Bree's high heels, which she had worn for her big closing day, sank into the soft turf. She was completely off balance. She cried out a short, terrified, "Oh!" as she stumbled backward. Her arms windmilled, but there was nothing to grab. She fell. Hard. She landed flat on her back on the perfectly manicured grass of my front lawn. The sound of the air being forced from her lungs was audible from the driveway. For a second, the entire neighborhood was silent. Bree just lay there, gasping, her hand flying to her stomach in genuine terror. Bree's gasp as she hit the lawn seemed to break the spell. My father, Leroy, who had been standing by the Escalade frozen in disbelief, finally moved. He had been silent for 30 years, a passive observer in his own home, content to let my mother and sister run the show. But seeing Bree, his golden child, shoved to the ground by the very man he had celebrated just an hour ago, something inside him finally snapped. "Get away from her," He growled, his voice a low, unfamiliar rumble. Marcus, still consumed by his own rage, turned to my father. "You stay out of this, old man. This is between me and this." Marcus never finished the sentence. My father, a 62-year-old man who hadn't been in a fight since high school, lunged forward and hit Marcus square in the jaw. It wasn't a movie punch. It was a heavy, clumsy, desperate swing fueled by decades of suppressed frustration. The sound of knuckle hitting bone cracked through the quiet afternoon air. Marcus stumbled backward, tripping over the curb, and landed hard on the asphalt of the driveway, his hand flying to his mouth in shock. A bright red smear of blood appeared on his chin. "Leroy!" My mother screamed, her voice a horrified shriek. "What are you doing? Stop it! That's Bree's husband, that's Marcus." She ran toward my father, grabbing his arm, trying to pull him back. Leroy turned on her, and for the first time in my 32 years of life, I saw my father yell at my mother. He ripped his arm from her grasp. "Shut up, Diane!" he roared, his face purple, a vein throbbing in his temple. "Just shut up! I have been silent for far too long. I have watched you. I have watched you poison this family. I watched you treat Demetra like dirt her entire life, and I said nothing." He pointed a shaking finger at Bree, who was now scrambling to her feet. Her fake crying forgotten her face, a mask of genuine shock at seeing her father erupt. "And you," he yelled at my mother, "you encouraged that." He pointed at Bree. "You created that monster. You taught her that she could take whatever she wanted, that she never had to face consequences. You pitted one daughter against the other." Diane stammered, taking a step back, terrified of this man she didn't recognize. "Look at her, Diane!" he bellowed, pointing not at Bree, but at me. "Look at Demetra, the one you called a failure, the one you said wasn't good enough. She's the only one of us standing here with any dignity, the only one who built something for herself, and all you did was try to tear her down while you coddled a thief." He turned back to Marcus, who was now sitting up dazed, staring at the blood on his hand. "As for you, you get off this property before I finish what I started." My father's roar was still echoing in the driveway when a new sound sliced through the afternoon air. A siren. It wasn't distant. It was close, and it was getting closer. A second siren immediately joined the first, a wailing chorus arriving at the scene. I glanced at Aunt Imani. She stood perfectly still, her face serene. She had planned this. She had timed it to the second. A police cruiser turned into the circular driveway, its blue and red lights flashing, painting the front of the house in garish colors. A second cruiser pulled up right behind it, blocking the entrance completely. Neighbors who had been peeking from behind their curtains now stepped boldly onto their front lawns, phones held high, recording the entire spectacle. The humiliation was no longer private. It was a community event. Two officers stepped out of their cars, their expressions professional and hard. They took in the entire scene in an instant. My father, Leroy, breathing like a bull, his fists still clenched. My mother, Diane, looking hysterical and frantic. My sister, Bree, still crumpled on the grass, holding her pregnant stomach. And Marcus pushing himself up from the asphalt, dazed, spitting blood onto the pristine driveway. "All right, what is going on here?" the taller officer asked, his voice booming with authority. He looked at my father and Marcus. "We received a call about a physical altercation and trespassing in progress." Marcus, seeing the uniform, immediately switched tactics. He pointed a shaking finger at my father. "Officer, thank God this man just assaulted me. I want him arrested immediately." My mother rushed forward, her hands fluttering. No, it's all a terrible misunderstanding. This is just a family matter. Sir," the second officer said firmly to my father, "I need you to step back. Just calm down." Marcus scrambled to his feet, sensing he was regaining control. "And they," he yelled, pointing at me and Aunt Imani, "are trespassing. This is my house. I just bought it. They broke in, changed the locks, and are refusing to leave." The officers looked confused, their hands on their belts, turning from Marcus to us. Before Marcus could spin another lie, I stepped forward. I held the leather-bound folder Aunt Imani had given me. "Officers," I said. My voice was the only calm thing in the chaos. "Here are the official filed ownership documents for this property. It is owned by Maple Drive Holdings, LLC. The taller officer took the folder, his eyes scanning the title page. "Okay. And here," I said, handing him the next document, "is the fully executed operating agreement for that LLC signed by Mr. King himself. It designates me, Demetra Williams, as the sole 100% managing member. This is my house." The officers exchanged a look. The facts were clear. "These people," I said, gesturing to my entire stunned family, "are trespassing. I have repeatedly asked them to leave." "That's not all, officer," I continued, my voice unwavering. "While he was trespassing, that man," I pointed directly at Marcus, "violently assaulted my sister Brianna, who you can see on the grass. She is 5 months pregnant." That was the nail in the coffin. The officer's attitude snapped from domestic squabble to felony assault. They looked at Bree crying on the lawn, then at Marcus's enraged, bloody face. "Sir," the first officer said, his hand dropping to his handcuffs, "turn around and put your hands behind your back." "What?" Marcus shrieked. "You can't be serious. She's the one lying. You are under arrest for assault, sir. Hands, now." The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs was the loudest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The sharp final click of the handcuffs echoed in the sudden, terrible silence. It was the only sound, and it was the sound that drew everyone. The quiet, tree-lined street of 123 Maple Drive was one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Black Atlanta. This was a community of doctors, lawyers, and entrepreneurs. Appearance was everything. Reputation was currency. And that currency was now going up in flames. Mrs. Henderson, from 2 doors down, the one who ran the neighborhood association, stepped out onto her porch, her phone already in her hand, recording. Mr. and Mrs. Davies, who were just pulling in, slowed their car to a stop in the middle of the street. Soon there were 5, then 10, then 15 neighbors. They weren't just peeking from behind curtains anymore. They were standing on their perfect lawns, forming a silent, judging audience. And what a show they were getting. They saw Diane, my mother, who just last week was bragging at the community brunch, now looking disheveled and frantic, her makeup streaked with tears. They saw my father, Leroy, a respected man in the community, red-faced and breathing heavily after assaulting another man on his own driveway. They saw Brianna, the golden child they had all watched grow up, the perfect daughter, now a pregnant, hysterical mess shrieking on the lawn. And most damning of all, they saw Marcus, the white, wealthy, trophy son-in-law they had all heard about. They saw him spitting blood, his expensive suit rumpled, being led in handcuffs toward a police car. And then they saw me, Demetra Williams, the failure, the quiet event planner they barely knew. Standing on my own front porch, untouched in a sharp navy blue suit, looking completely, utterly in control. Standing next to me was Aunt Imani, one of the most feared and respected lawyers in the state. My mother, Diane, finally noticed the crowd. She saw the phones. She saw Mrs. Henderson filming her. Panic, far greater than anything she'd shown for her daughter or her husband, flashed across her face. This was her true nightmare. Social ruin. It's just a misunderstanding," she shouted to the crowd, her voice high and desperate. She started walking toward the edge of the lawn, her hands fluttering. "It's a private family matter. Please stop. Stop recording. We, Marcus is—" But no one listened. No one lowered their phones. The damage was done. They weren't just watching a family fight. They were watching the spectacular public collapse of the very family who had always pretended to be so much better than everyone else. The officers were efficient. They secured Marcus's hands behind his back and began leading him toward the first cruiser. The neighbors were silent, their phones held high, capturing every humiliating second. Marcus in that moment seemed to finally understand the full, irreversible scope of his ruin. He saw the house he'd paid for but would never enter. He saw the neighbors watching. He saw his weeping, pregnant new wife who he had just assaulted. He saw his furious, disillusioned father-in-law. And then he saw me standing calmly on the porch watching him holding a glass of water that Aunt Imani must have brought me. His arrogance, his rage, his confidence, it all collapsed, leaving only a hollow shell of a man. As the officer opened the car door to push him inside, Marcus twisted his eyes, finding mine. His voice was no longer a roar but a desperate, hate-filled hiss. "You!" He spat, his lip bloody. You will regret this, Demetra. You'll regret this." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting him see that his threats meant nothing. "Regret?" I said, my voice clear and steady, easily carrying to the neighbors on the lawn. "Regret, Marcus, just like trust, is something you have to earn. It's not something I just give away." He stared at me, uncomprehending. The officer pushed him firmly into the back seat. The slam of the car door seemed to finally break Bree's paralysis. She scrambled to her feet, her face a blotchy, tear-streaked mess. She watched the police car with Marcus in the back pull out of the driveway. She saw her new life, her wealthy husband, her social status all driving away. She spun around, her eyes landing on me with a hatred so pure it was almost primal. "You!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You did this! You ruined everything! You ruined my life! You took him from me! I will never forgive you for this! Demetra, never!" She took a clumsy step toward the porch, as if to attack me, but my father instinctively grabbed her arm, holding her back. I hadn't moved. I just watched her, this woman who was my sister, this woman who had betrayed me without a second thought. I took one more sip of water and set the glass down. "Forgiveness, Bree," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the ice in my glass, "is a privilege, just like this house." I looked her dead in the eyes. "And you don't get to have either one." The story didn't end when the police cars pulled away. That was just the beginning. Within an hour, the videos were everywhere. Our quiet, upscale neighborhood was suddenly the epicenter of a viral social media storm. Mrs. Henderson's video, which captured Marcus lunging at Aunt Imani and my father's punch, had over 50,000 views. Someone else had a crystal-clear shot of Bree screaming, "I will never forgive you," followed by my final cold reply. The comments section was a wildfire of speculation, judgment, and local gossip. Inside my new house, Aunt Imani and I sat in the sprawling, empty living room. We weren't unpacking, we were watching. "They're calling it the Maple Drive meltdown," Aunt Imani remarked, scrolling through her phone with a grimly satisfied look. "It seems your mother's reputation is taking quite a hit." But the real explosion came at 6 p.m. I was drinking a cup of tea, the first calm moment I'd had, when Aunt Imani pointed to the large television mounted on the wall. "Demetra," she said, "you're going to want to see this." She turned on the Channel 2 evening news, and there, as the lead story, was my house. The anchor, a serious-looking woman, stared into the camera. A dramatic scene unfolded in one of Atlanta's most affluent neighborhoods today. Investment banker Marcus King, a prominent figure at Thorne & Associates, was arrested for assault. The screen cut to the cell phone footage. They showed Marcus, his face, bloody, being put in the police car. They showed Bree pregnant and hysterical on the lawn. They showed my father being restrained by an officer. Then the report cut to a new interview filmed just an hour ago on the steps of the courthouse. Aunt Imani, looking poised and powerful, was speaking into a microphone. "This is a deeply unfortunate situation," she said, her voice dripping with professional empathy. "It is not just a family dispute. It is a case of calculated financial deception and emotional manipulation." The reporter asked, "So you're saying your client was the victim?" "My client, Ms. Demetra Williams," Imani stated, "was betrayed by her fiancé and her sister, who then conspired to defraud her of her home and her inheritance." Mr. King's arrest for assault today was simply the desperate, violent end to a scheme that was falling apart. Ms. Williams did what any intelligent woman would do. She simply protected her assets from those she once trusted. The anchor's voice returned. Thorne and Associates has just released a statement announcing that Mr. King has been suspended pending a full internal investigation into allegations of ethical misconduct and financial fraud. I watched stunned. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. I had exposed him. I hadn't just taken back my house. I had taken back the narrative, my power, and his entire future. The 6 o'clock news was just the beginning. The real fallout from the Maple Drive meltdown, as the neighborhood blogs were calling it, wasn't just social. It was catastrophic. I found out later through Aunt Imani, who seemed to have sources everywhere, that my father's phone started ringing at 7 a.m. the next morning. And then just as quickly it stopped. Forever. Leroy's small consulting business, the one that afforded them the big house and the country club membership, was built on one thing: his reputation. He sold handshakes and trust to Atlanta's elite. But the videos, a respected man screaming his face purple, punching his white son-in-law in the middle of a manicured lawn, that wasn't trustworthy. Clients pulled their contracts, citing moral clauses. Business partners who had golfed with him for 20 years suddenly stopped returning his calls. His reputation, the only currency he truly valued, had evaporated in the time it took for a neighbor to hit upload. But the real panic set in when my mother went to the bank. Diane, desperate to hide the scandal, had tried to pay for a public relations crisis team only to have her card declined. She called the bank furious, demanding to know what was wrong. The bank manager informed her very politely that her retirement account was empty. The high-risk emerging fund Marcus had advised her to move everything into, the one he promised would double her money in a year. It was a phantom, a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. It was simply Marcus's personal slush fund. He had conned her. He had systematically drained her of every penny she had, all while sleeping with her daughter and smiling at her over family dinners. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had financially gutted my parents. He had conned Bree by promising a life he was stealing, and he had conned Diane by draining her savings. A week later, the for sale sign went up on their lawn. They had to sell the big house, the one I grew up in, the one they had chosen over my safety, to pay for the hole Marcus had burned in their finances. It was only then, faced with packing up their lives, that my parents finally realized the truth. Marcus had played them all. He used their own greed, their desperation for status, and their complete, arrogant dismissal of me as his primary weapons. They had been so busy celebrating the downfall of their failure daughter, they never saw the real predator standing right next to them. It had been 2 months since the arrest. 2 months of silence. I sold the Maple Drive house. I sold it fast, and the hot Atlanta market meant I sold it for a massive profit. I took the $800,000 Marcus had so generously gifted me, added my grandmother's $50,000, and I moved. I bought a penthouse in Buckhead, all glass and steel, high above the city, with a view that stretched to the horizon. It was a fortress, clean, modern, and holding 0 ghosts. I was finalizing the paperwork for my grandmother's new foundation when the doorman buzzed my apartment. "Ms. Williams." Frank's voice was hesitant. "There is a Ms. Brianna Williams here in the lobby. She's not on your approved list, but she's insisting she's your sister. She seems... Well, ma'am, she seems quite distressed." I smiled. "Send her up, Frank. I've been expecting her." I waited by the elevator, my arms crossed. When the doors slid open, the woman who stumbled out was not the sister I remembered. The polished, designer-clad golden child was gone. The woman standing in my marble entryway looked broken. Her expensive maternity clothes were replaced with cheap leggings and a faded, stained t-shirt that stretched awkwardly over her now very large, very advanced pregnancy. Her hair was greasy, unwashed, and pulled back in a messy knot. Her eyes were hollow, red-rimmed, and wild with panic. She looked at my home, at the floor-to-ceiling windows, at the modern art on the walls, at the life I had. Then she looked at me, and she crumpled. She didn't just cry. She collapsed, sinking to her knees on the expensive rug, her body shaking with the kind of desperate, ugly sobs that have no pride left. Demetra, she choked out, her hands clutching her stomach. Demi, please, you have to help me. Please. I didn't move. I didn't offer her a hand. I just watched. Help you, I repeated. Help you with what Bree... He's gone, she wailed, her words almost incoherent. Marcus is gone. His lawyers won't take my calls. They served me with annulment papers. My parents, they lost their house. They're living in some tiny apartment. They can't help me. I have nothing. Demi, I have nothing, and the baby is coming. She looked up at me, her face a pathetic mask of tears and desperation. Sister, I'm so sorry. I'm your family. Please. Family, I said. The word tasted like ash. I let the silence stretch, watching her suffer on my floor. Finally, I walked past her toward my desk. I did a little research after you were all escorted off my lawn, Bree, I said, my voice calm. I was curious about Marcus. You claimed this baby. I gestured to her stomach. Was his, the one thing that tied you to him. It is his, she cried, trying to sound defiant. It's his son. I picked up a file from my desk and walked back to her. I opened it. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. That's impossible, because I had Marcus's full medical history investigated. This is a fertility report from 3 years ago, long before he ever met you. I tossed the paper onto the floor in front of her. Marcus King is sterile, Bree. His sperm count is 0. He has been, in his doctor's words, biologically incapable of fathering a child for at least 5 years. Bree froze. Her sobbing stopped instantly. Her mouth fell open. I leaned down close enough to see the genuine animal terror in her eyes. You didn't just lie to me, Bree. You lied to him too. So I'll ask you one time, whose baby is that? The silence in the penthouse was absolute, broken only by Bree's ragged, panicked breathing. She stared at the medical report on the floor, her mind clearly racing, trying to find one more lie, one more escape route. There wasn't one. It was... She finally whispered, her voice hoarse. It was just a one-night stand. A mistake. Some guy from a conference. I don't even know his last name. She looked up at me, her eyes stripped of all their old fire, filled only with a desperate, animal-like fear. I found out I was pregnant right when Marcus and I started seeing each other. She confessed, the words tumbling out. I knew how much he wanted a son. I knew you two were having trouble. I thought it would be the perfect way to secure him. I thought he would give me everything. I never thought he was sterile. I never thought he would check. She had built her entire betrayal on a foundation of lies, not just to me but to everyone. I looked at her crumpled on my floor, a woman who had gambled her entire life on a single cruel deception and lost. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just a void. You're pathetic, I said. It wasn't an insult. It was a simple statement of fact. Please, Demi, she begged, crawling forward, grabbing the hem of my pants. Please, I have nowhere to go. My parents, they blame me for everything. They said I ruined them. I have no money. I can't have this baby on the street. You can't let that happen. Please. I looked down at her hand on my leg, then back at her face. I won't let your child be homeless, I said. That child is innocent in all of this. You, however, are not. I pulled my leg away and walked to my desk, picking up a single key on a plain ring and a piece of paper. I tossed them on the coffee table in front of her. Aunt Imani has made some arrangements, I said, my voice cold and final. There is a small one-bedroom apartment in East Point near the airport. The first month's rent is paid. There is also a job waiting for you. The night shift, stocking shelves at a supermarket warehouse. It pays $14 an hour. Bree stared at the key as if it were a snake. What a warehouse stocking shelves. Demetra, I'm a, I have a degree, and I interrupted her, am a CEO. But I started this new life with $50,000 in debt and a bleeding hand. You get to start at zero with a roof over your head. That is far more than you deserve. It's more than I ever got from this family. She looked from the key to my face, her desperation turning back to her old, familiar indignation. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I smiled. I'm enjoying the consequences, Bree. It's your turn to work for a living. Now get out of my home. 1 year later, the dust had settled, but the landscape of my life was unrecognizable. Marcus King, the investment banker who thought he was untouchable, served 8 months in a low-security federal prison for financial fraud. The video of his arrest on my lawn, combined with the evidence from my mother's portfolio, had made him toxic. He was disbarred by FINRA, and upon his release, he simply vanished. No one in Atlanta ever heard from him again. He was erased. Brianna, my sister, was learning the lesson I had learned my entire life. The world is cold when you have no resources. She was still working the night shift at the supermarket warehouse. I heard through the grapevine that she was taking online accounting classes during the day, trying to build some kind of future for herself and her son, who she had named Leo. She was raising him alone in that small apartment in East Point. She was finally experiencing the consequences of her own choices. And my parents, Diane and Leroy. Their fall was the most public. After selling their large home to pay off the debts Marcus had tricked them into, they moved into a small 2-bedroom rental apartment above a dry cleaner. Their reputation in the community was shattered. My father, Leroy, got a part-time job as a greeter at a home improvement store. My mother, Diane, who hadn't worked in 30 years, was now a receptionist at a dental office. The life of leisure and status they valued so highly was gone, replaced by hourly wages and the quiet humiliation of their new reality. As for me, I sold the house on Maple Drive. I couldn't live there. It was tainted by the betrayal, by the confrontation. I sold it for a huge profit, taking the $800,000 Marcus had paid, adding my grandmother's original $50,000, and I built something new. I took every penny of that blood money, and with Aunt Amani's help I established the Alara Fund, named for my grandmother. It is a non-profit foundation with a singular mission to provide startup capital and mentorship for Black women entrepreneurs in Atlanta, specifically in the fields of technology and high-end event planning. The very industries my family had dismissed me from. I wasn't just building a new life, I was building a new legacy. The Alara Fund was housed in a sleek glass-walled office in Midtown Atlanta. My office specifically overlooked the park. It was a space I had designed myself, warm, open, and strong. It was the antithesis of the dark, heavy study my father once ruled from. My assistant buzzed me. "Ms. Williams, your father is here, Mr. Leroy Williams." I was surprised. We hadn't spoken in 3 months. Not since he had called to tell me he and my mother were officially separating. "Send him in, Carla." The man who walked in was not the man who had punched Marcus King on my lawn. That man had been full of rage. This man looked smaller. He was thinner, and the expensive suits were gone, replaced by a simple button-down shirt and slacks. He looked like just another 63-year-old man. "Demetra," he said, his voice hesitant. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, twisting a small envelope in his hands. "Dad, please sit down." He shook his head, preferring to stand. I won't take much of your time. I was downtown. I saw the sign for your foundation on the building directory." He looked around my office, at the awards on the wall, at the bustling activity of my team through the glass. You've built something incredible here, Demi. Truly." "Thank you, Dad." I just wanted to say, he faltered the words clearly difficult for him. I'm proud of you. I know I never said it. I know I was a fool. I was blind. But I am so, so proud of the woman you've become. He stepped forward and placed the small crumpled envelope on my desk. This is... He cleared his throat. It's not much. It's $5,000. It's what I've managed to save since everything. I know it's not the 50,000. I know it doesn't fix what my wife, what your mother and Bree did, but it's a start. It's what your grandmother wanted you to have. A start. I looked at the envelope. I looked at his face, at the genuine, painful sincerity in his eyes. I slid the envelope back across the desk toward him. I don't need your money, Dad, I said, my voice soft. His face fell. Oh, I understand. I just thought... I don't need your money, I repeated, standing up and walking around the desk to face him. I have my own, but I do need a father. I've needed one for 32 years. He looked at me confused. I'm right here, Demi. Are you? I asked. The man who watched me be bullied by my own sister? The man who let his wife blame me for my own betrayal? That's not a father. That's just a roommate. What do you want from me, Dimitra? He whispered, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I'll do anything. This was it. The final payoff. I want you to go to therapy with me, I said. Both of us. Together. We have 30 years of silence and toxicity to unpack. We have to talk about Bree, about Mom, about how you stood by and let it all happen. We have to do the work. No more hiding. No more silence. I held out my hand. I don't want your $5,000, Dad. I want your time. I want your honesty. Are you willing to do that? He looked at my outstretched hand. He looked at my face, my uncompromising, steady gaze. He took a long, shuddering breath. And for the first time in my life, my father nodded. Yes, he said, his voice breaking. Yes, I'll go. I stood at the podium, the glass walls of my new foundation's headquarters glowing behind me. The room was filled with Atlanta's brightest community leaders, tech entrepreneurs, and the first group of young women who would be receiving grants from the Alara Fund. In the front row, Aunt Imani sat with her arms crossed, a rare, proud smile on her face. Beside her sat my father, Leroy. He looked different now, softer. He wasn't just here as a guest. He was here as a board member. Our therapy sessions had been brutal, but they had been honest. He was finally the father I needed. As the applause died down, he and Imani both clapped the loudest. I looked out the massive window that overlooked the city street, and for a second, my breath caught. Down on the sidewalk in the harsh afternoon light, I saw her. Bree. She was pushing her son Leo in a cheap stroller, her supermarket warehouse uniform visible under a thin jacket. She was clearly on her way to her bus stop. She looked tired, but she also looked strong. She stopped, perhaps sensing my gaze, and looked up right at me through the glass. Our eyes met across the distance. There was no anger, no hatred, just a lifetime of pain and history. She held my gaze, and then slowly she gave a single respectful nod, a nod of acknowledgement, a nod of acceptance. I held her gaze for a moment longer, and then I nodded back, once. She turned and continued pushing the stroller toward her bus stop. I turned back to the microphone, a genuine smile finally touching my lips. The room was waiting. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice resonating with a confidence I had earned. My career as an event planner was built on one simple principle. Every single detail matters. From the flower arrangements to the lighting to the timing, details are everything. I looked from my father to Aunt Imani. My life, I've learned, is the same. It's built on details. My grandmother Alara and my Aunt Imani taught me that. They taught me that the single most important detail in any business, in any relationship, in any part of life, is to always read the contract. I winked at the crowd. The room erupted in knowing appreciative laughter. I was free. I had forgiven perhaps, but I would certainly never forget. The most powerful lesson from Dimitra's story is to never underestimate the person your family calls the failure. While Marcus and Bree were blinded by their own arrogance, they were walking right into a trap set by intelligence and patience. This story shows that the best revenge isn't getting loud, it's getting smart. Dimitra and her aunt Imani used the system against the very people who thought they ran the system. They let their enemies' greed and assumption that Dimitra was simple be their own downfall. Dimitra didn't just get even. She won, proving that the quiet ones are the ones you should fear the most. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family only to come out on top? Share your story of sweet revenge in the comments below.